addition to Seders, I know the first 2 nights we do a Seder meal.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we do it twice?
Well, that's interesting because if we had the privilege of having Passover in Israel this year, we would only have one Seder.
Really?
And so the answer goes beyond just the use of leftovers in the diaspora. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. And that means that there are either 29 or 30 days in a month. That's simply the way the calendar functions. The problem is that it's not clear from month to month if the first day of the month is going to fall on the 29th or the 30th day of the month. And so before we had worked through the calendar and all of its issues, the way that this was announced was that people would come to the temple and they would serve as witnesses to where the moon was in the sky. That's the beginning of the first phase of the moon. And then they would pass the word along, and it would get out. Today's the 29th. Today is the first day of the month, right? But if you lived in an outlying community, a place like Alexandria or somewhere else in the diaspora, you might not get the word. So what do I do? Do I observe it on the first day or the next day? And so in the diaspora, to acknowledge the fact that we weren't sure about the exact day, first day of the month, we observe it over a course of 2 days. Now, today, you can know with surety when the holiday starts. You can go get an app for your phone, and you can look 100 years from now, and it'll tell you exactly which day Passover is going to be. So the question becomes, why should we in the diaspora continue to follow this practice? Why don't we just have one day of Seder? Right. And the answer is that it is a way of acknowledging to ourselves that we're in the diaspora, that we're not in the land of Israel. It's a way of acknowledging that we are outside of the beauty, holiness, and wonder of the land of Israel, that we're outside of the national homeland of our people, and that we acknowledge it by having that second Seder. So it's a very powerful symbol. And by the way, you end Passover a day earlier in Israel as well. So there are many, many positives for making Aliyah to Israel.
Noted. So, and with the Seder meal, I know an important part is Hagdalah. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
The Haggadah.
Haggadah.
So the Haggadah is the book that we read at the Passover Seder. And interestingly enough, it is the most published of all Jewish books.
Wow.
There are more editions of the Haggadah than any other. We're privileged here at Anshe to have the largest collector of Haggadot outside of the land of Israel. And he has more than 10,000 different editions of the Haggadah. More than 10, it's kind of an amazing thing.
It is.
Because wherever Jews went, they saw the Passover story as their story. And they would, sometimes it was through illustration, but they included themselves in the telling. And that takes us to what the word Haggadah means. In Hebrew, the word lehagid means to tell someone something. Right? If we were just like I'm telling you something now, we're having a conversation. And as opposed to hasipur, the story. So when you use a term like Haggadah, the telling, it's like you're telling a story, but the story isn't fixed. The story is evolving even now. And so there are all kinds of traditions that develop that have been added. Over here, there's an orange, right? Amongst the many Passover elements, there's an orange based upon the story about whether or not we should have a cup of Miriam, right? I mean, we have a cup for Elijah. Shouldn't we acknowledge women somewhere in the Seder, especially when you live in an egalitarian society? And someone said, well, we'll have a cup of Miriam when we have an orange on a Seder plate. So a lot of people put that orange on the Seder plate to remember that statement and say, yes, we are going to have that cup. So there's always evolving traditions that we need to celebrate, consider, and think about.
Excellent. I like that a lot.